Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Family Matters again for this week. Tonight we have some special guests, Nathan and Susanna Lewis, and they're going to be talking to us about their experiences of multiple pregnancies and miscarriage. So it's a very, really heartfelt subject tonight, really, and a very encouraging one in the way that they've grown through it, and they have seen how God has been working in their lives and have been able to accept God's work in their lives. Miscarriage affects more families than we realise, and all too often those going through it feel like that they need to either hold it all together or suffer through it silently and grieve alone without being able to share the pain with anyone or even a spouse. So Nathan and Susanna's inspiring story tonight is going to help us understand how to support each other and to bridge those intense feelings of separation and to accept God's work in our lives, to grieve, to rebuild, and to trust in God. And so welcome, Nathan and Susanna.
Thank
really
you.
Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
Just before we start, I wanted to do a Bible reading. And this one comes from Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. And I think this really summarizes what we talked about the other night. And it says this: trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will make your paths straight. So with that introduction, so welcome to Family Matters tonight. And tell us, do you know how common is it for miscarriage to happen in a pregnancy? Is that the right way of saying it?
I don't really know the official stats. We could probably look it up quite easily and find the information. I feel like I've read somewhere that it's like 1 in 4 pregnancies, but I might have that wrong. Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know the official stats.
It might be more like 1 in 4 people who have had families have experienced a miscarriage. I think, like we were saying the other night, Robert, it's the more you are prepared to talk about it, the more you realize so many people have experienced this. Not just inside the truth, but just out there in normal everyday experiences. So many people have tragic stories lurking in their past which they've never been able to share or get out and heal from or recover from. It's like, and it eats them out from the inside, sometimes. So I think this is a very real subject, a very poignant subject, and a subject which is maybe more widespread than we'd imagine because we just don't talk about it.
Yeah.
I imagine that it's easy not, it's harder to talk about it because often it happens before people even know you're pregnant. So therefore that would make it harder to be able to say anything about it once it's already occurred.
Yeah, and that was your experience, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we were pretty we were pretty cute, really, weren't we, back in the day? Like early marriage is just full of excitement. Yeah, we're still totally cute, but just early marriage, and you're just excited, and you don't know what the future holds. And our first, we'd been married for I think 2 years when we sort of decided that we were going to have babies. Made that big decision because we were busy on a youth conference committee and we wanted to wait till the conference was over before having children, thinking we had all that control at the time. So yeah, we basically stopped contraception and got pregnant pretty much within the first week. It was the first pop. So exciting. And I think we had I was pretty crook, those first few weeks you can feel a bit sick. But I did okay. I was actually working for a brother in the ecclesia at the time, Uncle Paul Vogel, and I was just working part-time, and I just managed to get through. It was just, it was just those early days. And then we had family coming to town. I can't remember who it was coming to town. It might have been my mum. And we decided to wait until she came to town to let people know. And that was going to be about 14 or 15 weeks. So, and that was easy because it's your first pregnancy. So you don't really show and you just kind of push on through. So about a week before that, the symptoms of feeling sick went away. And I thought, oh, this is great. The first trimester's over. Like I'm out of that sick feeling, and it's going to be all go from here. And had a week of no symptoms, and then that was when that night happened where I went into what was probably an early labour in the late evening.
So what was you told us you had a visitor in the house. Tell us what this
happened?
was looking like. What was happening?
Yeah, so we had a brother, a young single brother staying with us at the time. As I said, we were newlyweds. We'd been married for a couple of years, and he was staying in the guest room, and he was flying out the next morning. It was like a one night. He'd been traveling New Zealand, and he was staying with us for a night, that one night. And yeah, as I said, we hadn't told anyone, so he didn't know that we were expecting, and nobody else did. So yeah, it was about 10 o'clock at night or so, and I started to get some pretty intense pains and went into kind of labour-like contractions, which I didn't really know that's what they were at the time because I hadn't had any children, so it was quite an uncertain thing. I just remember sort of saying to Nathan, oh, I just don't feel that well. Things aren't looking that great. So yeah, Nathan we went to bed early-ish, and I laboured throughout the night without really knowing what was happening, sort of on and off. And then in the morning, I did get a bit of sleep, and then in the morning, Nathan said, look, I don't really know what to do, and he decided to.
Did you know by this point that you were on the point of miscarrying the baby?
Yeah, it was pretty obvious that whatever was happening wasn't great. I was bleeding and having a lot of pain, so it was quite intense. It was definitely a mini labour. Like now that I've had children, I know that that's what it was. Yeah, whereas at the time I wouldn't have been able to tell you that. Yeah, so in the morning it was ramping up actually, and getting more intense in the morning when we woke up. So Nathan went out to our guest and let him know that I wasn't feeling well, and I just stayed in the room. And then he came. I mean, he's coming and going. I think he sort of came in a few times. Said, what do I do? I don't know what to do.
Yeah, well, I think when we can talk about this a little bit more in a few minutes, but I think there's a huge difference between how the male and the female react to this kind of a problem and or this situation. And Suze is like going into emotional overdrive as well as physical labor, and her whole body and mind and soul and spirit is in complete turmoil, and all her expectations are dashed, and it's awful, and as a husband, the first time, you're like, not that I was a whole lot better the second and third time either, but the first time you're like, I have no idea what is happening and what to do. I can't do anything. I can't stop it from happening. I'm kind of really 100% powerless to do anything to help. You can ring the doctor. They're just going to tell you what you already know. So, I was kind of thinking, what can I do to help? I'd pop in and see her, go back down and get breakfast, kind of just make sure this guest was okay. And in the end, I decided the best thing to do, believe it or not, was to take this young brother out for breakfast, right? Out to brunch. I'll shout,
out of the house.
Let's go out, like we'll just leave Suze. We'll just say she's not feeling well. And so we went out for brunch. I'm sitting there, I'm having eggs Benedict, and I'm like, okay, this is a very surreal experience. you know, but I think it highlights the fact that as the male or as the husband, it's hard to know exactly what to do, especially when it's the first time, you know. So I'm certainly not saying that was the right thing to do. So I took him out for brunch. I suppose I was trying to protect Suze from him knowing, because he wasn't married, you know, he didn't have any idea. I didn't even really have any idea. So I'm like, let's just get him out, get him off to the airport, and then I can come back and sort of be here and, you know, mop up the mess, so to speak, in every sense. So I think it highlights the fact for me, looking back, that there is a huge discrepancy with how we as men deal with this emotional distress and how the women do. And I think that when a woman conceives, in that moment she becomes a mother, and even if you don't carry the baby to full term, and even if you lose it at a few weeks, you feel and experience that loss bodily and emotionally. You feel like something has died inside you, and you feel like you know, one of your children has died, even though you don't know who it is, or it's just maybe a few inches long. Whereas for the man, it doesn't affect us bodily, it's not happening inside us, and we almost don't become dads until the baby's born, and then we hold it in our arms and we feel like that the moment of birth is when we become a father, you know, whereas the moment of conception is when the mother becomes a mother. And that difference in time is huge, because she's just going through all this emotional loss, and I'm kind of feeling a little bit disconnected. And we didn't really talk about that so much. So I think that it was a source of separation and distance between us, because she felt like I was just uncaring and I didn't enter into the emotions, and I was sort of like just, you know, blocking off the emotions. And as a man, we kind of look for the solutions, you know, and we kind of look for the objective opinion, and we start thinking to ourselves, like for myself, this is just my own experience, within a few minutes, I'm thinking, well, this is God's will. Like, that's logic to me, and that's like basic logic. It has to be God's will if it's happening. It must be for the best, even though I can't understand it now. Therefore, if it is God's will and it is therefore good, it must be because the baby's not forming right, and this is his mercy and his goodness to get rid of the baby now, while there's a, you know, if there is a problem, this is like how he's working, and we don't know, but our job is not to question why. It's just to kind of accept and be thankful that it's happening now rather than later, where it could be even more traumatic, right? So you're thinking it's all in God's hands, and you're making that leap to a sort of objective solution very quickly, you know, whereas the woman, in my experience, does not make that leap maybe for years. You know, sometimes it takes their whole life before they can see that that might have been a good thing, or it might have been God's mercy or his kindness, you know, especially if you end up having subsequent children, which some people don't. If you do, you can see it as a good thing, perhaps a little easier, but that, you know, we're very quick to be objective and look for a solution. And so there's a big discrepancy in how we deal with this situation. So, yeah.
So how was this affecting you, Susie?
Yeah, I think that first miscarriage was pretty tough, you know, because it was right on the eve of letting everybody know. And I think generally speaking, I'm a pretty positive person. So I remember Nathan saying to me, "It's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine." I thought, "Oh yeah, okay, it's going to be fine," and just sort of swallowing that at the time and saying to myself, "Actually, you're going to be fine. Pick yourself up, dust yourself off, get on with life. It's going to be fine." And probably the error in that for me was that I didn't really take the time out to grieve like I should, like I really, in hindsight, needed to. And it was fine in the sense that the next time we tried to get pregnant, which was very soon after that, you know, we were pregnant again within weeks, and then the hope started all over, you know. And that second time we were booked to go on a weekend to Sydney to visit my sister and brother-in-law in Sydney, which was pretty exciting. Nathan was going over there for a work conference, and I lost the baby either the day before we went or the day we left, or something along those lines.
How many weeks on were you with that one?
So the first one was about 14 weeks, and the second one was just around 12 weeks.
Right.
Yeah, so right around that time when you're getting pretty excited that you're going to be able to let everybody know.
Yeah. So nobody knew that you were pregnant second time round either?
Second time round, nobody knew, I don't think. No, because you're pretty nervous about letting people know. I did let Michelle know when I got to Sydney that that was what was happening, because I was just felt like I wasn't really there. I just couldn't focus on anything. So that was good. I was able to have her support for the weekend at least. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So did you let anybody know afterwards with the first one, or no?
No, we didn't.
No.
I think we talked a little bit about that the other night. I was saying, like, I had this sort of weird feeling like I just wanted it all to be perfect. You sort of have that vision when you your early marriage, you think, oh, it's just going to be perfect. Well, I did anyway. Everything's going to be great, and it is great, but God makes that greatness in different ways to what we imagine,
Yes.
So my vision of great was like, just get married, and 2 years later you have your baby, and then you have another baby, and everything's just works out perfect, and they're all clean and tidy, and they sit up nicely.
They don't cry or anything. Yeah.
No, I know, it's all, and they sleep through the night, and it's all good. So I thought, well, if I don't tell anyone it's not perfect, then maybe I can just sort of pretend that it is. And that's really where I was. I talk a little bit about that in the article, is about the facade that we put on when we're not feeling that great, And we pretend like we are to keep ourselves safe. And that's what I did for many years. Yeah.
So just a point of contrast, did you find it slightly easier to cope with, like Michelle knowing this, with the second pregnancy and miscarriage, that this was happening? Did you find that slightly easier, just having somebody else there to give you a hug and to give that bit of support?
Yeah, definitely on the weekend. Yeah. But she was in Sydney, so I flew home and she stayed there, and
right.
I didn't go any further than that, I don't think.
Yeah.
But yeah, on that weekend, because I was pretty dazed out, and I was exhausted, physically and emotionally and spiritually. So I think on the weekend it was very good. But I didn't allow myself to really probably connect on a deeper level, because I was just too upset.
Now, you wrote an article for Wilderness Voice, and you called it, well, we've actually used the same title, Miscarriage, the Bitter and the Sweet. And in that article, I've put the stuff up on the chat box, and I'll put it up again a bit later. But in that article, you talked about your miscarriage giving you a lot of separation from God, separation from people, and putting on a face. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I think a lot of that for me had to do with expectations. I think I'd sort of just touched on that a little bit. I entered into getting married. Nathan was my knight in shining armor. He's going to save me from everything, all my troubles and woes. And by God's grace, it's worked out even better than that. So that's good. That's another family matters.
Well, look forward to it. Yeah.
Oh, look, we're out of time.
Oh, we're out of time. Yeah. No, I think expectations is the real key to that, because I had really high expectations on life. I really did, and on marriage and on family life, and I'd come from a broken home, and I thought my home's not going to be broken. My home's going to be perfect, and I'm going to make sure of it, and I'm going to do everything I can. And then, like, I think that whole control thing was there. Like, I want to control it and make it all just tidy and tucked in and neat and lovely. And when it wasn't, it was like, oh, okay, I'll just sort of pretend that it's not. And the more I pretend and the more I cover up and the more I don't really be authentic and show people who I really am and what I'm going through, the more I have to hide. So I become more and more hidden, and I put on more and more of a facade out the front while the back's just crumbling away. And actually, you know, with God and with my brothers and sisters, I all of a sudden find myself in a place where, in with Nathan, like, there's no spiritual connection. It's very shallow. And it's all because of the this intense trial that I'm not dealing with in a very spiritual way. I'm turning away from God.
How did it affect your faith?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I've never lost faith, but I have, my faith has weakened through it, wondering, you know, I just thought motherhood was my calling. Like I've got 6 sisters, and, you know, they all had babies, and it was like they had babies even when they didn't want to have babies. It was having babies, and I was like, how come I can't have babies? They're all having babies, you know, and what's the deal with that, you know? So there's lots of questions and lots of questioning, and you know, there's teenage pregnancies out there who are on drugs and their life's messed up, and they're pregnant, and they're having this baby and they don't even want it, so to speak. And then there's this lovely couple who love God, and we can't have a baby. We're not able to have a baby. We've gotten pregnant so many times and not actually been able to have the baby. So it's just, you know, you just start thinking, overthinking, wondering, asking lots of questions and wanting to know why. And I think that was a big part of it for me, was giving up really needing to know why, and realizing actually God is good, and what God does is good, and he's shaping me, and I'm Susanna, and this is Nathan, and he's shaping us to be someone for his kingdom, and this is a part of our journey, and we don't know why yet, but I believe one day we will.
Yeah. How did it affect your faith, Nathan?
Well, I think our journey's quite different, you know. Like I was sort of saying before, you know, I never really had a journey where I doubted and questioned and then came to a point of acceptance that this was God's will. I kind of was like, yeah, I can see this is God's will right from the start. Like I got to that point within, like, certainly minutes, you know, may have even been faster, you know. It's like that wasn't the problem really for me. The problem was that I didn't really know how to emotionally connect and show the kind of love and compassion and empathy and care that Sue's really needed in that moment. So I think for me, the journey is not so much one of, wow, my faith has grown, even though it has, definitely through this experience, because, you know, you've experienced this, and then you have, we've been blessed with 3 healthy children, and, you know, you think, wow, we really have been blessed, and of course your faith grows. But I think it was more almost like a relationship growth that was happening for me, where, you know, I kind of, and even years later, because, you know, Sue's kind of, if I can just speak for you for a second, I could be wrong, but it feels like she kind of closed down because she didn't feel like I understood. So she sort of like just bottled in the emotions, and then it would happen again, and I just would respond in the same kind of male, just kind of not helpful way, you know. Yeah, like there was one time we had maybe, how many pregnancies before bundle? Maybe four, and then we had our first child, and then after bundle we had another 3 before we had number 2 and then number 3, and we were in the United States. And I remember one time, my brother was over, I think, and we were booked to go to Disneyland, and Suze is having like a miscarriage like the night before,
Oh no.
and like looking back, it's just it's a hard situation, but my brother's over. It's like we're booked with a few people to go to Disneyland or Magic Mountain. I can't remember which Disneyland. And Suze is like just as you'd imagine a woman to be, and she's like just devastated, and it's like I'm kind of torn between what do I do? Do I abandon everybody else and
Disneyland
and my brother? Or do I abandon Suze, and like they kind of don't know. Like if they knew, then maybe they'd go, man, stay with Suze and look after her. We'll go to Disneyland by ourselves and have a great time. And probably I'd be like, oh, do you know what? Thank you so much. That's totally fine. But because they didn't know, and we're not supposed to let them know, and we weren't talking about it, I'm kind of feeling stuck in the middle between Suze, who's like feeling like I don't care, and I'm not, empathetic in any way, and all these people who are like looking at me going, why are you so weird? Like, you're kind of like, we're supposed to be going to Disneyland, and you're like acting really weird, and I'm like, I've got no idea what to do, So even then, after like 4 or 5 of them, I'm still not really responding in the right kind of way. And looking back, I think, if you were to ask me what would I change about how I responded in that situation, I'd probably be more vulnerable and honest and say to my brother or whoever was there, and even in that first instance when we had that young brother to stay, I'd say, listen, this is really weird, but this is what's just happened in the night. I'm not expecting you to understand because I don't understand either, but I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to call you a cab and you can go to the airport, and we'll talk later. And he would figure that out later in life, and realize that moment was a special moment, and he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it wasn't his fault. And he'd probably be like, that was cool, and maybe we'd actually be closer because we'd had that experience. But I took him out for brunch and then took him to the airport. He's got no idea to this day, so there's not even that connection of that intimate, difficult moment. So I think looking back, there's a few things I would do differently, how I'd handle it, but it would be kind of connecting better.
Yeah, we actually did. I went to Disneyland.
Oh, really?
Oh, did you?
Yes,
Wow.
because I wasn't pregnant. I thought, well, at least I can go on the rides. I got to see the bright side of this. So
Wow.
I know it's a bit silly. Looking back, I'm like, that's a silly thing to do, because this is the whole thing where I wouldn't allow myself to be sad and grieve. So I thought, well, I'll just, Nathan, I remember you saying
Disneyland's like the ultimate solution, right? It's the world's happiest place in the world. I mean, that's the right place to be to overcome this problem.
But
do we all agree with this?
We got there. We did get there. I had actually miscarried days before, and I was booked in for what's called a D&C at the hospital.
How many weeks had you been with this one?
I think I was about 10 or 11 weeks, and
Okay.
I was booked in. It hadn't come away, so it was there. You could see the baby on the scan, but there was no heartbeat. And we'd booked to go to Disneyland. So I just thought, do I stay home and feel sorry for myself and lie in bed with a hottie and just feel sad? I didn't have any pain. I was like, I'll just go. So I went, and I lost it halfway through the day. I lost it, and I was in and out of the bathroom because I was obviously bleeding with the loss. And trying to go on these rides, and it was silly. It was just silly. It was a silly decision, and we did actually end up telling the people we were with. We did in the end, because we had to.
The girls.
Yeah, and your brother.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, because he was there for the following week. But we struggled. Our problem was we struggled with being open and honest and making ourselves vulnerable. So here we are today.
Wow.
Yeah, you are.
It's a big overcoming thing for us, because at the time it was like, nah, we're just going to lock this down, and one day it'll all look fine,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned a few times you didn't allow yourself to grieve. What do you think grief looks like? if you did allow
Yeah.
yourself to grieve, or if someone was going through this, someone's listening now. There are 40 people online. If 1 in 4 women have a miscarriage, what would you say to them to help them grieve?
Yeah, I mean, I said, you've heard the stories of me not allowing that, like going to Disneyland on the day. I mean, whatever, you can choose to do whatever you want. That was my choice. And when I looked back, I felt sad that I did that. I felt sad that I didn't ask Nathan to stay home that morning when he went out for brunch. I felt like, why didn't I honour the loss? Because I wanted things to be perfect. And so that was just me. Everyone will be different. Some people will be like, oh, I don't want it to be perfect, I just want to have a baby. I'll just tell everyone what's going on, and they'll be really honest and open about it. But allowing myself to grieve looked like accepting that was what was happening, just accepting it. And accepting it was just the beginning of being able to grieve and say, yes, I accept that I've lost another baby, and it is a baby, it's pregnancy, but it was a baby, it was a potential baby. And letting myself cry and just letting Nathan know, actually, I just feel really sad that this has happened, and allowing myself to be sad. But a big part of that as well, and coming through that, the next step for me was surrendering that loss and saying, look, I've got no control over this. I can't make the baby stay, because I couldn't. I was pregnant 10 times, and 7 of those I couldn't. There's nothing I could do. No one had any great ideas.
It was all the boys.
Yeah, that's one suggestion. What do they call it? Population control. No, accepting it and surrendering it to God, and just saying to God, actually, God, you have control over this. And you read the scripture, which is the other part of it, which is prayer and meditation. You read the scripture that says that God has power over life and death. Yahweh giveth, Yahweh taketh away. Blessed be the name of Yahweh. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And Hannah's prayer, where she speaks of him having power over life and death. And these things are, I mean, this is a long journey. This is not a 5-minute thing. This is 10 years of getting pregnant and losing babies. So you wouldn't expect anyone to sort of wake up one morning and go, oh, okay, I'm going to trust the Lord. But this is what God has done for us. God has done this. Yeah, so for me, that's been my grief process, is allowing myself to feel that sadness, and actually saying to myself, Susanna, this is something that you should actually be okay feeling sad about. And a part of that has been connecting with other women, sisters in Christ, who have had losses. And I think I said to you the other night that this whole thing came about for me because I'm a homeschooling mum by God's grace, and I was at a homeschooling conference, and I was just chatting with this French lady who's in New Zealand for a short period of time, and she was sharing with me about how her friend had just had a miscarriage and she just didn't know how to support her. And I just looked at her and I thought, I can't believe you just said that, and I just thought, this is my time to shine, so to speak. And probably didn't think that, but it's just, and I just said, well, I've actually been pregnant 10 times, and I only have 3 children. I've lost 7 babies, and I can tell you what might be, I can give you my story. And I shared with her all my story, got to the end of it, and she said those odd words, which were, thank you for sharing your testimony of faith. And I just kind of looked at her and I thought, yeah, this is my testimony of faith.
Yeah.
And I hadn't given it the words before. Before it was just a sad story that, was sort of like a 3 out of 10, 3 out of 10. That's pretty low rating, isn't it? But it's a 10 out of 10, it's a 10 out of 10 because it's been life changing, and learning to trust God. Anything that brings you closer to God is just good. It's good.
So share with us what facilitated that journey, that process of faith growing again and connecting you back with God to make it the 10 out of 10.
Yeah, I mean, it's loss for me. It's loss. As the saying goes, a dear friend of mine's got the sticker on her fridge, and it says, "When you're down to nothing, God's up to something." And
Yeah.
I was down to nothing. You know, I'd lost 4 babies, and all my friends were having babies, and I just felt like a big fat nobody who couldn't do what all women were designed to do. And when you feel like that, there's nothing more you can do. You can't control it. You can't control it. It's something you can't control. And when it's something that you've got no power over, you have to admit, God, I have no power over this. So either it's going to make you stronger, or it's going to turn you away, right? Like anything in life. This is not just miscarriage, isn't it? It's anything in life.
That's true.
So accepting really is the first step.
Yeah, 100%. Acceptance is the key that just unlocks the rest of the journey, really.
So you told us the other night how you would just sit down with the Bible open and you would just keep reading over verses until it really sunk in. And that was a real pivotal turning point?
Yep, 100%. Just learning to use the Bible as like my Bible rather than like the Bible. It was always just the Bible, and we did the Bible readings and we read the Bible at the meeting, and it was good. And there was great points in the margin, but when you're down to nothing and God's up to something, and you've got your Bible on your knee and you start reading it, and verses jump off the page at you all of a sudden like never before. I mean, any trial is going to have that happen to you if you're reading scripture, and it becomes a lot more personal. And there were times where I just opened the Psalms or some, probably mainly the Psalms, which for obvious reasons are pretty helpful during those difficult times. And I just read and read and read and keep reading until there was a certain verse, and then that would be my verse for however long until I needed to read again. And one verse that I remember made a huge difference. I think it's Psalm 61. You might have to correct me if I'm wrong. And it talks about running to the rock. When I am overwhelmed, I will run to the rock that is higher than I am. And I think at times I felt very overwhelmed, and there was a distance between Nathan and I because of that inability to connect. And then you realize, I can run to the rock that's higher than I. So that was a verse for a long time that would just be, I would just remember it, and it would come back, and I'd go over and over and over. And when the negative thoughts would come in, I'd say no, Susanna, and go over those verses. That's, I guess, it's prayer and meditation, but it's not the kind that I imagined in my perfect world when I was a young person.
So what helped facilitate bringing you both back together, within your marriage, and to be able to communicate and connect again in a way that you could understand each other? What helped bring that about?
It's a process of time, isn't it? Time and communication.
I think having 3 children helps enormously.
Wow, does it?
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
really?
I take that back. It doesn't help at all. I take that.
It helps with the pain of miscarriage.
Yeah,
it doesn't help with your marriage relationship. No, it does. It's really, it's been, I think we probably both speak for ourselves, but for me it was time and being willing to create a vulnerability that wasn't there before. Being young marrieds, I think we both had quite sort of rose-coloured spectacles on, and God worked in our lives to show us actually it's not like that, and you have to get your hands dirty, so to speak, and creating a spiritual vulnerability where you're willing to say, all right, well, this is really something very intimate and very private and very sore and very, ouch, we're hurting. So it's either going to turn us away from each other, or we're going to come together and we're going to ask God together. learn to pray together,
Yeah.
and ask God to help us together. And then that's really what it came.
Yeah, I think that it's these like really difficult moments in life where actually you realize that you need each other, and actually God has made us different so that we can be there for each other. And you know, I'm having to learn that, you know, I need to connect emotionally and spiritually. Otherwise, whatever I do or say or think or act or whatever is kind of irrelevant, you know.
Yeah.
And I might have, you know, the wisdom of being able to objectively analyze the situation and say, listen, this is the will of God, and it's going to be for the best, and here's why, and so forth. But if she doesn't feel that she's loved and connected with and cared for, there's like zero response, there's zero connectivity. So if she's able to teach me like emotional connection, and I can lend some objectivity in amongst her emotional distress, you can have a connection and you can grow in faith and trust. So it's like an opportunity to do that when it's really hurting. But you've both got to be prepared to give. And I think like initially, you know, we just kind of bounced off each other a little bit and didn't connect. So that's just our story, and we got maybe better at that because of time and just growing a bit older and having a little bit more wisdom and a little bit more willingness to, you know, reach out to each other, which is all the things, basic things that you're supposed to do as a husband and wife. But we're kind of, you know, maybe God was teaching us how to do that through these trials. And that's just the experience of our life. It'll happen to other people differently, but I think it's, you know, it's these emotional moments of need that is where you're actually able to form the intimacy of a marriage in a special way. And you've got to kind of grasp hold of that and learn from each other. You've both got things to give. Like Suze needs to have that objectivity because she's like, could be lost, you know? So I've got something I can give and I can bring to the table, but it's worthless if I'm not emotionally connected.
You can't reach her on her level.
Yeah. So it's like we've got to just give in to each other. So I don't know.
There's definitely a spiritual aspect to that. Connecting like that intimacy. You know, someone once said, "It's into me you see," and that's on every level. You know, your spiritual level as well. And I think, you know, when we were connected spiritually, then the pain and the loss of all those things would feel less than times when we were separated, and then the pain would feel more, you know, through the grieving process.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my experience.
What would you say is the sweet? As a sum up, what's the sweet of the situation?
For me, the reason I chose the bitter and the sweet on that particular Wilderness Voice article was because of the poem at the end. I don't know if you saw that. It's my favourite poem. I love that poem. I don't actually have it here, otherwise I'd read it out.
I think we have got it. We could probably read it later. But
I chose that because it's talking about learning to realize that God is in both. He's in the bitter and the sweet. And there's sweet times in life and there's bitter times in life, and sometimes one's longer than the other. But God is in both, and God is good. So that's the reason I chose that. You know, he's there by the desert road and the riverside, and life will take twists and turns. And, you know, when I held that first baby in my arms, I actually just could not believe it. I actually had not allowed myself to believe it, you know. And then I got this baby in my arms, and it took me a long time to think, this is my baby, like, this is it, I've got one, you know. And it was just unbelievable. It was just crazy.
So you're saying the bitter made the sweeter. the sweet.
Yeah, it did. And just to realize he's always all the way through, he's there. And the sweet for me is, I mean, it was having a baby, but it's not really that in the story. It's more that even like that God will be in both, whatever it is, God's there. And the sweet for me is, it's that I have learnt, and I'm always ever learning, obviously, because no one ever gets this perfectly. But I feel like my faith, I'm converted. God has shown me that he loves me and that he's looking after me, us, my children, all of us, all of his children, all of everyone. He loves us. He wants us in his kingdom, and we can trust him. I can trust him.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
that the purpose of the journey is to trust, not to get, and I really love that phrase.
Yeah, that was Nathan.
Yeah, well, I think that's really good, Robert, because you know, we've been blessed with 3 kids, but other people aren't, and you know, you can feel their pain, but I think, you know, in the grand scheme of things, the journey that we're on is God conforming us to the image of his son by trials usually, and in that process we learn to trust. So we're wanting children, you're praying for children, you think you're about to get one, and then it's taken away from you multiple times, and you're devastated and disappointed and all those things. But the purpose of the journey is not to get children, even though you think it is. The purpose actually in the grand scheme of God's purpose is that we learn to love and trust him, and when we do, actually we're getting all of the things that we were really wanting right from the beginning, you know. So
there's a future and a hope.
Yeah.
He's got good plans.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And the whole lessons you get from it, you know, the miscarriage is your, as you say, your faith testimony, your testimony of faith. Everybody has a different journey, a different look, but we can all come to those same conclusions no matter what the journey is.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful to just be able to have that expressed and to be able to see that being born out of this experience, these experiences that you had.
One last question just before we finish, just quickly, because we've pretty much run out of time. But what advice would you give for those supporting women who have suffered loss? And probably an answer from both of you would be good. I mean, what would you like, Susanna, from, you know, what would you have liked for support?
Yeah, at the time I didn't really want any, because it was just a real hard nut to crack. I don't want anyone to know, but I know there's people who do know, and I know people who know that I know. And I think acknowledging that it's a loss, acknowledging that, you know, there has been a death. There was life and there is life no longer. That's really important. Someone who has been pregnant, they feel, from my experience, I'm just going to speak, that's all I can speak for, they feel like they're a mum. And I use the words in my article about, and I meant it, you know, that I felt like a mum with empty arms, because on that first pregnancy, I had allowed myself to have mother-like emotions and tendencies towards this growing, this God-given little life, and it was there, and I couldn't, you know, feel that it was there in the early weeks, but I knew it was, you know, I'd seen the scan, so to speak. So acknowledging that it is a loss, and I think rather than trying to hurry someone through the grief and say, you know, it's been a long time, like why don't you get out and have a good time and let's go to Disneyland, sort of thing. You know, this saying, this must be a really difficult thing. If you haven't been through it, then I don't understand what you're going through, but actually I can imagine it must be really hard. You must be feeling so sad. This is devastating. This is a difficult thing, you know. If you have been through it, then share, be vulnerable. I wasn't vulnerable in those early days, and I think I lost a lot of connection. Like Nathan said, we could have had a really close friend with that brother who stayed with us if we'd shared. And actually, you create this opportunity for prayer together, for vulnerability, to be raised onto a different level if you're willing to share. There was something I read. These aren't my thoughts, but I did read it, and it really struck me about this. And that was when someone does have a baby, you know, you celebrate that baby's life every year, and you have a birthday party, and you invite people over, and everyone claps and hooray, and you blow out the candles, and that's your time to say, yay, I had a baby a year ago, or 2 years ago, or 5 years ago, or, you know, and you celebrate these milestones. And when it comes to loss, we don't like to do that. We like to go, oh, I had a miscarriage. Okay, I'll just try and get over it as fast as I can. And everyone's thinking, well, hopefully she gets over that soon, because it's not that fun sitting around someone who's sad. You know, we don't really like being around people who are sad. We want to celebrate. We want to have a good time. We want to have birthday cake, not, you know, talk about losses. And we sort of want to say to the person, well, that was a year ago, you know, or that was 2 years, or that was 5 years ago. You know, my first miscarriage was like 14 or 15 years ago. I still feel sad that I lost that baby, and those experiences I had, they still bring a sad feeling, because it was a little piece of me that died that day. And you know, that's the truth. And I don't celebrate the date or anything. Some people do. I celebrate, you know what I mean, commemorate. So not hurry it along, not try and hurry it along. You know, allow them to remember. You know, it's like remembering the dead person. I mean, it's different because you don't have memories of the person who has died. But people who've lost someone they love, they want to talk about them, don't they? They want to remember. They want to hear the stories you've got that you remember. So allowing the person to say to them, that must be really sad. How are you feeling? Allow them to share. You don't have to have the answers. You don't have to give them your opinion. You don't have to share your thoughts. You can just be a listening ear and a hug, and just shh and listen and acknowledge that it's sad.
Yeah. And Nathan, what about you? What advice would you give to husbands who are who have a wife who's going through this?
Yeah. Don't go to Disneyland.
Yeah.
Cancel your tickets.
Look, I don't know. I think you know, all I can do is kind of maybe share my experience, you know, with, say, a young brother who's going through that, if I know, and just say, hey, it's really important to connect. Otherwise, just maybe make the time and space so that Sue's can connect with the wife, you know, like, because that's probably the best I can do. It's not really my job. I'm not going to be able to connect with her. She's not going to want to listen to me.
What advice could you give to the husband?
Oh, to the husband?
Yeah.
Yeah, just what I said before. Just, you've got to be there for her, you know. Otherwise, you'll hear about it on Family Matters in about 14 or 15 years.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your testimony of faith tonight. It's been really amazing.
It's a wonderful journey, and just to be able to share that with others, because yeah, there are many that suffer in a very similar way, but not even those that don't have this exact same experience. The same principles absolutely apply, because everybody does have a faith testimony. Everybody does have the bitter and the sweet.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been amazing.